And Ben, the parents are essentially just outlining some of the challenges that many of us go through. I could relate when one of them said, I pick my kids very early because I don't want them to stay and play beyond a certain time. Yeah.
I mean, so many realities. A lot of them were talking about the challenges of online studying. I think Mr. Lukman was talking about the fact that whatever he's doing, sometimes he has to shuttle between his work, whether he's working virtually or at work, to have access to his children and, ensure that maybe they are done with this session virtually. He moves them on to the next session and all of that. So there's a lot that must be done, not to talk of the cost he was talking about. He had to get a laptop and 2 notebooks. For the children. I'm talking of, notepads for the kids and all of that. So the dynamics, it cuts across from school fees to online studying to buying a mask every day, sanitizer every day, and all of that. It's quite a lot. It's taken a toll, and that's why we all ought to be responsible so we can get past this phase.
Yeah, the last parent mentioned the collaboration with the school and how they listen. I tell you what, not all schools listen so well. Not all the schools will collaborate. There's a particular school where parents was telling me the owner of the school mentioned to them in an online meeting with the parents. Some parents were calling for them to do something about the school fees. And she said, well, use washing powder, for example. If you go into a supermarket, there is a very popular one. The price is high, but there are other ones as well. You choose the one that you feel like
that's what this parent was told.
That's what they were all told on the platform. So it's more like if you think you can't, you can get out of the school. So not all schools are that nice in terms of, so find one that will accommodate you, especially within these times.
Exactly.
Don't force yourself to stay in a school where things are so difficult. The owner will not even listen to you.
And one thing I found out speaking to, the parents, it appears, at least on that angle, they appear to be comfortable. The way the school has related with them, and the school seems to be very forthcoming with, hey,
it's a partnership.
So these are your problems. Let's accommodate them. You want to pay in installments. Let's accommodate them. I know another school like that. And this was right at the period after the lockdown. And they were not tolerating anything. In fact, parents had to pay huge sums of money. I know a friend who's also in media who had to pick her 2 children out of that institution.
Yeah. If you can't just get out. Because it's just going to get worse. And it's a partnership. It's not like if you can't get out. Yeah. So Ben, thank you for highlighting on this issue. I guess many parents will be grateful that this is coming. This is coming out, especially at this time. Schools are back. Some of them are back. Mine will go back next week, and we've just been on break for 2 weeks, and we have to pay the school fees. But, we'll deal with it. Okay, so from one very important conversation to another. In March this year, a mass inoculation program began, and next week the country will begin administering the second doses of AstraZeneca COVID-19 vaccine. And that's why this research that we're going to talk about pretty shortly is really important. It was a survey conducted just 2 weeks after vaccines arrived here in Ghana, first in February. They assessed the willingness to receive or not to receive the vaccine. And this was a research done by the University of Southampton on vaccine acceptance, as I've just said. So let me introduce to you my guests that I will be engaging. Keshefs Atembler is Executive Director, Pax Africa Partner, Pandemic Support Group. There you are. Good morning. Thank you so much for joining us here on the AM show.
Welcome. Thank you for having me.
Great. So first of all, this was carried out even before we started receiving the doses here in Ghana. So I would like for you to just outline the key questions that you put to the respondents.
So the key question actually is about the hesitancy, whether they would want to take it or not. But then we measured that against various background details of the respondents, including their ages, the gender, their communities that they live in, whether they are employed or unemployed at the time of the study. their religious backgrounds, their political beliefs or associations, and many of those. But we measured that against the hesitancy because our interest in this study was to look at the drivers for or against vaccine hesitancy in the country in support of decisions that the authorities would be making.
Let's start with gender. I was curious to read your findings there. I thought, okay, men and women, what's that got to do with whether or not we want to take the vaccine?
So that is a very interesting one also that we noted. And what we followed up trying to understand was that the male gender is known generally to be more assertive, to be they know what they would want, having access. And this is also put within the context of Ghana, where the culture comparatively between the male and female genders, women are more, they want to control what they say, how they express things. Maybe not they wanting to control, but they are not generally assertive compared to the male gender. And this is something that we have all known about. There are efforts to transform the gender space actually because of some of these things. So when we saw this coming out in the findings, it was quite interesting to know that it is. And the gap is actually, it's quite huge about, so we did a multi-varied analysis. And so we put the two genders against all the other drivers. And we noticed that the females were about 97% more likely to express hesitancy than the males. And that's quite huge. That's quite huge. So I can share personal experience of this also with you, where I had to encourage my mother and my sister, when the vaccines came and the doses were being given out, they were quite hesitant, and I can tell you till date they have not gone for it. But myself, I have gone for it. I know a few colleagues. That's not to say that women are not taking the vaccines. Yes, a good number of them are taking them. And the good news from this study actually is that a large proportion of the population will actually want to take the vaccine. That's about 82.4% of the population would want to take the vaccine. So it is a smaller number, which is about 9.7% who are expressing this hesitancy. Okay, so it is this small number of police citizens who are expressing hesitancy that we had to now interrogate fair. And so the statistics that we are producing from this study are mostly about those expressing the hesitancy, not the larger group that will be okay to take the vaccine.
Sure. Yeah. I can also understand religious and community type, people who feel strongly about religion also being hesitant. But political parties, so there was NDC, NPP again brought into this research. Tell us about the findings.
Yeah, quite unfortunate that they're going away, but you can equally understand them considering from last year when the pandemic started and the various that's NDC, NPP were looking for how to deal with the situations. The government put up the COVID structures, the fund, and all of those, but that was an exclusive approach, without necessarily looking at bringing the various stakeholders into the space. And that was the NDC also trying to do something on their own, which was quite unfortunate for us as researchers, because we would wish for the ecosystem for evidence or knowledge production, research production to be, or research uptake actually, to be collaborative. Let's build a common space, So if there is a situation, in this case, a pandemic that we need to manage, we don't take exclusive approaches in that regard. So with the things that happened last year, the NDC forming its own COVID team and all that, certainly the alliances are there, vertically. So there are people who would naturally want to listen to their leaders, being the NDC, much more than the government structures, And so even though the party as a NDC not taking any position against the vaccines, the fact that they are not in active, participation in this space creates some doubts within the minds of their followers, and they would naturally want to hesitate and see how things will go first. Maybe some people will die initially. After those things happen, then they would want to refrain from it. But it was still good to see the president, for instance, taking that initiative to take the vaccine at the very onset.
And of course, we also saw the flag bearer in the last elections for the NDC, John Dramani Mahama, also publicly take the vaccine together with some other NDC officials. But of course, this research was, before we saw all this play out. So how many? Of course, you reached out to over 2,000 persons. How many NPP people were hesitant, and how many NDC people were hesitant?
So proportion-wise, we had. Do I have the figures here? So we're looking at a big gap in here that the NDC, for instance, has about 42.9% hesitancy space in there, and the NPP colleagues in there had about 39.9. That's even in the negative. So it's a difference that speaks to the entire. But this is actually for the bigger group, not just about the hesitants.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So, it was also revealed, through this research that those who were harder hit were more likely to be hesitant.
Exactly. So when you say those who were harder hit, you mean financially?
No, this is not. So my understanding, and you've got to correct me, I thought those who were more exposed, who were likely to get COVID-19, were more hesitant in taking the doses.
So there are two sides of that. One is the financial, those who were financially hit, in that, they had their incomes distorted and all that. They rather expressed lesser hesitancy to that, because they knew the effects that it was having on them. So they were willing to push forward. And then there were those also who have been, who said they were complying with the protocols, those who use more of the sanitizers, the washing of hands, the masks and all that. They were also, willing to take the vaccine because they understand the effects that it is having on them, just like their colleagues. Those who had financial effects of those. So they understand the effects, the potential effects of the virus on them. So they were willing to take the jabs.
How much of these findings eventually reflected in the acceptability of COVID-19 vaccination?
So for now, the study actually we did the first round in August, and the acceptance level was lower. That's in August of last year. We had about 63.2% of the respondents being willing to take the vaccine. Now, when we did the second round in March, the acceptance rate had gone higher, which is about 82.4%. So we can see some progression, some improvement in acceptance. And what we're suggesting now is that if we can put measures in place to do targeted communication, to those groups who are expressing hesitancy, then we could further increase the numbers, the willingness to take the jabs.
So what do we have to, of course, you've given one recommendation there. We're getting ready to take the second doses already. There's been some issues surrounding this one, of course, because of where it is coming from. Again, also because we know that there is an expiry date to it. The reason we've got to take it in good time. People who gladly took the first dose are still not very clear with these details coming out with the second doses. So what do we have to do as a country? What must be done?
So first and foremost, I believe we need to procure as much as possible more of the doses because those who took the first jabs had not received the second ones, and there are other studies that even suggest that the recommendation is to give more space between the jabs, So the delay to some extent will actually be to the advantage of Ghana. The delay we have experienced from the procurement may actually be an advantage to us, but the delay shouldn't be too much. So once we have this about 350,000 doses arriving, it's still not enough because the first ones we had were more than this.
600,000.
So we just need to administer them as soon as possible, so that those we can also start with the first timers, those who are yet to take their first doses.
Can I go back to when you say the delays to our advantage? Kindly explain.
Yes, so we noticed that the timelines given by Ghana Health Services to have an interval of about 6 weeks in between the doses, and this plays out that the recommendation is actually between 6 and then 12 weeks, interval. So, and there have been studies conducted to see which of these, timelines would work better, and it seems to suggest that the wider, the time, the gap in between, the better the effect in the protection cover that the individual will have. And so we may just want to, that's how come I mentioned that it could actually be in our advantage, with this delay. I, for instance, was due to take my second dose on the 2nd of May. And once that has not been taken, scientifically, it suggests that I'm likely to have a better cover with the next dose that I have. Just that it shouldn't go beyond the 12 weeks timeline.
Okay, that's interesting. So you also say that the opportunity should be given to first timers. I know how in the first phase they needed to let some specific people take it so it could boost the confidence or encourage other people too. And I thought we would go the same way. People are waiting to see if after you take the second dose, you still be okay. But you have a different strategy.
So yes, I think that is okay. The plan that government put out to get some key officials to take them, from the beginning, including health officers, because they are frontline officers, of course, and we need to protect them like our soldiers. They are our soldiers, our real soldiers in this time, and others. So that is the plan put out by the Ghana Health Service is just adequate. What we're looking at is more of the governance space for communication. We need to to employ multiple stakeholders in this communication. We need to see NDC and NPP, for instance, working together to communicate to their people, to address the political, driving forces there. We need to see our religious. Another study conducted by the Ghana Health Service, also in March, suggests that amongst the various professional groups that they surveyed, the religious leaders were the least, group willing to accept the vaccine. So if this is the situation, then their own followers are equally, likely not to take them because they will stand on the platform, on the podiums to preach and then to send out the communication messages. So if they, as the religious leaders, are not willing to take it, then their own narrative, their own messaging would be against taking it, which will not, for our target of reaching about 20 million people by close of year.
Well, Keshav, thank you so much for your time. He's the Executive Director of PAX Africa Partner Pandemic Support Group. We're grateful that you could share details of this research examining drivers of COVID-19 hesitancy here in Ghana. We're super grateful. Still to come, we have a conversation on Fix the Country. Ben is here. We've been talking about we've been talking about the vaccines. You've been talking about how your time has essentially passed. But Keshav is assuring us, according to a research that's been done, that the longer the better.
Oh, well, we've always known this. I mean, from Dr. Bediako to Dr. Achiano and others who have spoken to the issue, they've said that there's a 12-week window.
Yes.
If you get it within that time frame, you're good to go. And in fact, if you don't get it right so like I said, I should have got mine on the 3rd. I've missed that now. Today's the 10th. If you get it a bit later, it is better. But if you go outside of the 12-week window, that's where the problem is, because then you might have to start the cycle all over again.
Yeah. So those of us who are due to take it within the 6-8 weeks, it's actually apparently better that you're taking it beyond that. But of course, we're not crossing the 12-week line. Let's get on to our next conversation on Fix the Country. That protest that went online, of course, because of an injunction that had been secured by the Ghana Police Service, or may I say, by the state. We've got a conversation on the back of that. We'll remind you of what some people did. Did Ghana Police take over the protest or not? What has been achieved really, and what is next? These are questions that will be answered after this.